La esencia histórica de Irlanda.
Se ha dicho que los ingleses nunca recuerdan y que los irlandeses nunca olvidan. Pero si los irlandeses están obsesionados por el pasado, es porque en realidad nunca lo han conocido a fondo. Este es el país más joven de Europa Occidental, pero su cultura es de las más antiguas.
This nation was born out of failed rebellion, brutal repression, bloody civil war.
Well, there's no doubt that we're going through a very significant change in the relationship between the church and people in general.
Famous Irishman. Say, Parnell.
Probably Johnny O'Connell.
It would have to be Wolftown. Was he Irish?
I mean, I'm Irish. I was born in Ireland, and I'd like to speak Irish. And there's special days in Ireland that we have here in Ireland.
What you're getting is a terrible forgetfulness of events which lie at the very foundation of this state.
For 800 years, we had been occupied by, various forms of English-British rule. There had been in any number, periodically, there had been rebellions. A point had come again in our history where, for decades, attempts had been made through the British Parliament to obtain self-rule. It seemed like that would not be obtained. So a group formed around a revival, a cultural revival, to seek to obtain that by armed rebellion. And on Easter Monday, 1916, the leaders of that rebellion, against all the odds, effected a 7-day uprising against British authority in the middle of what was then the Great War in 1916.
Los rebeldes de 1916 se rindieron después de luchar en las calles durante una semana. Los británicos los apresaron, los juzgaron como traidores y los fusilaron. De pronto, su causa capturó la imaginación de los irlandeses. Poco después vino la independencia, pero los irlandeses ahora tienen dificultades para recordar a estos hombres y su violenta rebelión.
Something has happened since '69 that because of the IRA, the whole Irish nationalist tradition has been tarred with the same brush, and it has got so that, to even mention 1916 means immediately your approval.
La cárcel en la que murieron los rebeldes se ha convertido en galería de arte y museo de identidad nacional. Pero los eventos que aquí terminaron han sido convertidos en leyendas y mitos. Cuando Irlanda obtuvo su independencia en 1921, sus 6 condados del norte eran los más ricos y más protestantes. Continuaron siendo británicos. La creciente violencia de esa división le ha dado color a nuestra perspectiva del pasado. La Pascua de 1916 puede haber sido el momento clave para la vida irlandesa moderna, pero los irlandeses han revuelto su pasado para servir al presente. Habían comenzado a hacerlo en 1916. Los rebeldes montaron su última defensa en la oficina postal de Dublín, y la Irlanda independiente la recuperó más tarde de sus antiguos enemigos. Pero ese era el día de la Pascua, y los rebeldes adoptaron como su héroe a Cuchulainn. Este antiguo guerrero pagano murió a manos de un compatriota irlandés, y los anglo-irlandeses lo redescubrieron el siglo pasado. En Irlanda, el pasado nunca es lo que parece. Los irlandeses no solo son políticos, también son narradores. Están rodeados de historias, pero estas son imposibles de leer. Los celtas llegaron aquí en el siglo VI a.C. y formaron pequeños reinos que compartían un idioma común. En el resto de Europa, el tiempo ya había borrado su civilización, pero no en Irlanda. Aquí, el paisaje está cubierto por evidencias de generación tras generación. Había una institución celta llamada Dinocus, el centro de la sabiduría. La tarea de los bardos era narrar las historias de cada localidad, y así con el tiempo, el propósito original de cada edificio se ha ido perdiendo en el olvido. Este lugar es más antiguo que las pirámides y más antiguo que Stonehenge, una precisión de ingeniería creada por un pueblo olvidado. ¿Para qué? ¿Es una tumba real? ¿Un teatro de luz y sombras? ¿Quién sabe? Los irlandeses no solo recuerdan su historia, sino que durante siglos, esta los ha inspirado. Son pocas las historias irlandesas que tienen conclusión. La Irlanda moderna nació en una oficina postal y su historia ha sido una historia de movimiento. En algunos años han emigrado unas 40.000 personas con un promedio de 20 años de edad, dejando atrás esta sociedad de lo antiguo y lo nuevo, sin algo intermedio.
On the topic of immigration, most of it, of course, is traceable to the period of the famine in the 1840s. It remained a tradition even after it ceased to be an economic necessity. If you had a brother or a sister already in America, it seemed axiomatic that you went, even if the life here was at least possible and livable.
En 1840 se perdieron las cosechas de patata y más de 1 millón de personas. El negro año del 47 vive en la memoria de la aldea como la fecha en que perdió la mitad de sus habitantes. Algunas villas se han ido reduciendo desde entonces.
My father's family there were 14 in it, and there were 11 in my mother's family, and most of those are in America and England. In 1841, for instance, the population of the parish of Newtown Sands, which is where we are, would have been 3,500. That was just before the famine. In 1851, just after the famine, the population was 2,500. In 1966, it was 1,500. It's now 1,000. And next to the forge is the old school, which was opened in 1888. It was a segregated school. This part here was the boys' national school. This part here was the girls' national school, and there was an imaginary line going down through the yard like the equator, and the boys couldn't cross over and the girls couldn't cross over in pain of excommunication. The class I had in 1975, there were 41 in that year. Only 12 now remain. There are another 12 or so dispersed between America and Australia and England, and one in the Foreign Legion, and the rest are in various cities and towns throughout Ireland. It would break your heart to be watching youngsters, 7 and 8 year olds in front of you and saying, God's sake, like, the only option many of you will have is the immigration boat, whether you like it or not. Something has to be done, not just about the buildings, but about preserving the people in the country as well.
Cuando vuelvan los irlandeses, será a un lugar alterado por el tiempo y la imaginación.
When we were kids in Mayo, I remember there was a priest who used to, every Sunday in the church, he'd preach against immigration. And he used to stand up there in the pulpit and say, oh, the dangers of young Irish boys going to Kilburn, the women they'll meet, the exotic people they'll meet, it'll be terribly bad for them. And of course there we were all in the back of the church counting our pennies to find out how much had we enough to go. And caught the first boat if we could. It was only once I got a bit of perspective on the world in general and sort of felt that I had done quite a lot of things, that I could find the time to come back to Ireland. And so I came back during the summers. And it was so, I don't know, the sort of sense of time here was very attractive. The past was really pervasive. You know, you would stop and get out of the car, driving through the mountains, and immediately you'd find that there was a ruin there beside you, a potato drills. There was sort of the past there in the middle of nowhere, sort of almost whispering, this feeling of time. And the same then you went into a pub anywhere in the heart of the country, and the slow tick of a clock, and the missus standing at the end of the counter and saying, is it the way you're after coming from Cork or whatever?
One of the kind of mythic figures almost of Irish culture is the Yank coming back, and the poignancy and the humour of the person who comes back and thinks it's all going to be as it was. And in fact, of course, the whole ground has shifted from under them.
Mientras más tiempo pasan lejos de ahí, es más intensa su nostalgia.
Well, I'm a law professor in America most of the year, and I have family with roots in the potato famine emigration period, and had traveled here as a tourist a number of times and decided I wanted to set some roots out and actually live in Ireland during the summer. So we started looking at old houses, and we ended up with this one 8 years ago. The rural values are simple values, friendliness, family, love of the land, neighborliness. Those are all, I think, important values that children enjoy and should be made a part of. And my children have had the opportunity to get to know rural Ireland, to spend summers in an environmentally pure area where there's basically no pollution and there's a lot of wildlife, rabbits and the occasional fox or badger. That's a unique type of situation that you wouldn't get in an urban area like Cincinnati, Ohio, where we live most of the year.
En la orilla de varios mundos, Irlanda es más grande que sus fronteras. En Kerry se dice que Boston es la siguiente provincia. Como muchas de las historias irlandesas, las historias de los viajeros a veces resultan ser ciertas.
We now have a generation which is a kind of, which isn't the Yank coming back, but almost the Yank going home. I mean, if you've grown up in a culture which is, you know, saturated in American movies, in American songs, in American food, in American T-shirts, you know. I mean, if you've seen the movie and you've read the book and you've worn the T-shirt, you may as well live the life.
La política, el tiempo y los viajes hacen que el pasado sea importante, pero imposible de recordar por completo para los irlandeses. Eso también le ha sucedido a la iglesia. Cuando San Patricio llegó en el año 431, ya existía una joven iglesia en Irlanda. Como todas las demás, estaba cambiando sus antiguos rituales paganos por los cristianos, mezclando la fe con la ley bretona local, popular, apasionada y liberal. Una forma de vivir y de morir. La Irlanda de San Patricio podía ser pagana y cristiana al mismo tiempo. Estando tan lejos de Roma, los irlandeses continuaron así. Pero Irlanda se ha convertido en un lugar cosmopolita. La iglesia aún es popular y apasionada, pero ya no tan liberal. Aún para los desilusionados, el asistir a la iglesia significa pertenecer a una comunidad, pero comienzan a aparecer diferencias entre el hecho de ser irlandés y el de ser católico.
The early Christian church in Ireland was famous and notorious for its looseness. Partly this was because many of the Brehon laws were incredibly liberal. I mean, if you look at the law affecting women in Ireland today, it's very repressive compared to the freedoms enjoyed by women under Brehon law. Under Brehon law, a woman could divorce a husband who was unsatisfactory. And unsatisfactory might mean cruel, neglectful, frequently absent, no good in bed, homosexual, etc., etc. None of these freedoms survived the Anglicization of rural sexuality, but the early church had to accommodate itself to a fundamentally pagan, exuberant, energy-worshipping system.
The church wedded the native culture in a way that was fruitful. Rather than rejecting much of what was there, it found itself able to take it in and give it life in Christian form.
I don't know in comparing it to other types of Catholicism, but it's certainly very deeply embedded in Irish culture and psyche. There would still be, even amongst those who were alienated from the church, there would still be this profound respect for the priest and the religious.
At any given time in history, you are going to get this tension between, shall we say, the ideals as perceived by the church and perhaps the ideals as perceived in the wider society, or perhaps what is desirable in terms of legislation for the wider society.
It's more than just religion drifting out of people's lives. It's part of people's identity is confused. Their whole sense of who they are is being questioned.
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can. And the wisdom to know the difference.
La división de lealtades en Irlanda no es nada nuevo. A mediados del siglo XII, los ingleses voltearon hacia el occidente y descubrieron un conjunto de pequeños reinos. Consiguieron una bendición papal y los invadieron. Pero los normandos ingleses no estaban preparados para el encanto de la vida en Irlanda y pronto se establecieron en sus campiñas, haciéndose casi más irlandeses que los irlandeses, conservando un lugar privilegiado en su nuevo hogar. En la frontera norte aún quedan personas que saben lo que significa ser irlandés e inglés y que conocen la complejidad de ese sentimiento.
Oh, I mean, there's never been any question this has been my home. In fact, when I lived in London, I would say that subconsciously, all I ever really wanted to do was to get back here. And I mean, I feel Irish and always have felt Irish. The question really is, do people in this country have that perception of me? I suspect not. Voices tell tales.
La Inglaterra del siglo XVI se unió a la Europa protestante para comenzar un imperio, estableciendo una nueva colonia en el norte de Irlanda. La familia Madden fue una de las primeras en llegar. Hubo algunas escaramuzas, pero pocos enfrentamientos verdaderos. Tal vez los irlandeses eran demasiado pacíficos o demasiado astutos. Tal vez la relación fue más sutil, pero más triste.
It was interesting because he said to me suddenly at breakfast this morning, he goes to a school now, although it's in Ireland, where they're not taught Irish. He said, when I go to my next school, I think I should learn Irish. I want to take up Irish. Now, he didn't elaborate on that, but I would say that he's aware of the fact that he'll probably, when he grows up, want to live in this country, and that
how very
knowledge
important it is to have
terribly
Irish.
important.
In every walk of life, you've got to have some knowledge of the Irish language.
Yeah, he said this to me a couple of days ago, and I must say, 5 years ago, I would have thought, you know, that what a waste of time that was. But I must say, I'm actually very delighted by that now.
Cuando estalló la guerra civil en Inglaterra, los católicos y los protestantes tomaron partidos opuestos. Fue una nueva disputa para Inglaterra, pero para Irlanda fue una catástrofe.
Oh, I don't think you can live on the border without it spilling into your lives. I mean, by virtue of the fact that you cannot actually go where you want to go in a straight line or by the nearest route, inevitably you know you're on the border. But we are not threatened by being on the border. No, we don't feel threatened.
Irlanda se dividió por las guerras ajenas. Los protestantes y los católicos se vieron enfrentados en la causa de otros. En julio de 1690, en la ribera del Boyne, el protestante holandés William de Orange venció al católico inglés James en la batalla por la corona de Inglaterra. Los irlandeses quedaron atrapados entre el fuego de la lucha por el poder en Europa. Solo que después, la batalla se reescribió, diciendo que los católicos apoyaron a los perdedores y por eso eran traidores. La minoría protestante debería gobernar, no solo en el norte, sino en todas partes. Aún después de la independencia del sur, Irlanda continúa reviviendo las batallas de las guerras civiles inglesas.
We're being observed by a British Army post on top of that hill up there. They're looking down at the hotel and they have very sophisticated apparatus, listening devices. They're possibly listening to what we're saying, and they're looking into Dundalk 8 miles away. And that's part of the security process, and I understand that. If it saves one life, it's justified. The IRA rule by fear. They intimidate, they kill people. That instills fear in ordinary, decent people, and they rule by fear. We are a rather sad people who have been subjugated for hundreds of years by the British. We achieved our freedom 70 years ago, and we've made magnificent strides in a very short period. I don't regard myself, I don't regard the British as our enemies, but I have to say that Britain didn't cause the problem in this country.
Los ingleses dieron a los irlandeses una reputación de violencia y falsedad. Pero a pesar de sus diferencias históricas, han convivido tranquila y pacíficamente. Él es del norte y ella es del sur. Después de lo del Boyne, los protestantes del siglo XVIII construyeron una ciudadela. Dublín era un puerto vikingo que vivía del comercio con Inglaterra y que ahora era la capital de un régimen que desconfiaba de los británicos. Pero desconfiaba aún más de los católicos irlandeses rurales. Para los irlandeses acostumbrados a la pobreza y poco acostumbrados a las ciudades, Dublín significaba un elegante símbolo de represión. Sus gobernantes protestantes prohibían su idioma, su iglesia y sus costumbres. Un régimen separatista. Dublín aún sigue dividida. Es una ciudad sobre todo para los jóvenes, en busca de una Irlanda más nueva y más antigua a la vez.
Cáthóid bhfuil coní orsa is out inistúin.
Coní orsa leibchán tá sé heidir Demi le Lorna Carter.
Agus inistúin cadí nuaidí maithe a bhuinean leis an áit sin dar leatsa.
Go leor dí le déanamh féinta an id sport agus discos agus ruaidí le déanamh do daine agus go leor siopaí agus níl sé roiáda an carr.
The Irish language was seen as part of the dominant theology that had to be rejected. So there was a period when the Irish language, already anyway in long-term decline, lost yet another bright and wonderful generation. Now, paradoxically, the Irish language is associated with, if you like, radical youth rebellion. It is also associated with urban centres. So you've got a situation where in places like Dublin, Dundalk, Waterford and other growth areas of urban population, people are voluntarily and with pleasure rediscovering their own language.
Después de la hambruna de 1840, los terratenientes anglo-irlandeses se fueron, excepto en el norte, para dejar en su lugar a una nueva raza de granjeros irlandeses. Se olvidaron de las tradiciones inglesas e inventaron las suyas propias y nuevas. La independencia irlandesa en 1921 fue su logro. Fue una victoria de los campesinos. Los luchadores por la libertad de Dublín en 1916 fueron sus héroes, pero no sus realizadores. Dublín sigue siendo impulsada por la Irlanda rural y su juventud viviendo en una ciudadela.
So many young people have gone in the age group 20 to 40 that this would be a generation that would mediate between the young and old in a demographically more healthy society. If it's gone, the old and young tend to elaborate, if you like, fantasies of their own. The old become even more rigid than they might otherwise be if challenged by the young. And the young can become even more hedonistic. They don't examine their lifestyle in the absence of this middle generation that would mediate the conflicts. And I think in a way that explains what's happening in Dublin and in Ireland in general today. You have two very different moralities, two very different cultures existing side by side, not fully intersecting with one another because of this missing middle generation.
Cada vez son más los irlandeses que viven en la ciudad y sienten incomodidad respecto a la antigua y frugal forma de vida. Pero este es el país más joven de Europa Occidental y sus tradiciones son de las más antiguas. Los irlandeses ya han logrado antes vivir con más de una cultura y de algún modo triunfarán.
It's a cliche to say the Irish are very conservative people. Yet how do conservative people manage to go from a peasant farm speaking Gaelic, living in a very traditional, very rooted society, to go from that to New York, to Hell's Kitchen, to Boston, to Chicago, and not simply to survive, but within a generation to have worked their way to the top of certain power structures in those new modern urban societies. They can do that simply because of a history of poverty. The history of the poor is a history of being able to change in order to survive. It's not profound change, it's not transformation. It's whatever you have to do in order to survive, you will do it.